All right, so do you guys remember when I talked about the NANOQ from Thor Zone? I also did a second follow-up video on that where I talked about some of the revisions they're gonna make to the chassis based on our feedback. Well, I'm not gonna wait for those revisions to do a build in it. I wanna build in this one, and then I'm gonna transfer everything over to the other case to see how well that really sort of holds up. But anyway, I've been kind of dying to see how the build goes with this, so I finally got the custom cables ready for it. I got all our parts, which we picked up at Micro Center. So this should actually be a lot of fun. The ViewSonic X24K LED projector is the world's first projector designed for Xbox consoles. Featuring screen sizes up to 120 inches, native refresh rates up to 240 Hz, built-in Harman Kardon speakers, and low latency gaming modes, the X24K gaming projector from ViewSonic delivers a truly customizable experience for both gaming and HDR cinema. To see our full-length video covering features and user experiences, follow the links in the description below. So I'm not gonna go through all the nuances of the case. I've already done a full review and unboxing and assembly of it. I do think I'm gonna take the handles off though and let it be more of like kind of a landscape instead of a tall, if you will. Only because the handles are fairly narrow given where the weight is, so it gets a little wobbly. And I do honestly feel like these handles should be wider. They didn't talk about doing any of that, but I do think that's something that should be considered. So after all the work I went through to get them installed, I've got to put the caps back on. Because it'll look dumb with those handles sticking out, I think, if it's on the side like that. Also too, so the parts I chose, like this is an i7, but I didn't go with an i9 because I'm trying to keep it all within spec within the 750 watt SFX power supply from Corsair. Not that we couldn't have fit a larger power supply. I think we could have even fit an SFX L in here up to 1,000 watts, which would allow me to do a 4090 or something. I'm not gonna do a 4090 in here. But that's because the cables that were provided for me are custom made from a company called Bespoke Baka, which I guess means custom idiot or something like that, I think. Don't quote me. But anyway, the guys both told me baka in Japanese means idiot, so take it as you will. So these cables are already made and they're made for this power supply. Otherwise, I probably would have gone with 1,000 watt just to have a little bit of extra headroom. So we're going with the 4080 Super because this is a 280 watt power supply, a 285 watt power supply, not to mention the black is gonna look really good in here. So it gives us something to finally use a super card in, I guess. But this is well within spec of the power supply.
Wait.
Why do I have two of them? Did I buy one at Micro Center and then forget and buy a second one? Okay, so I need specifically the SF750. I'm grabbing this one just because the sticker's not as messed up. Because the cables for that build. Well, we have a spare now. This one was sponsored, and then this one I bought. So anyway, 4080 Super, as I talked about, Trident Z, Z5 RGB memory for Intel. This is actually a really fast kit. This is 7,200 megahertz. So if it runs, it runs. If it doesn't, it doesn't. The power supply we've already talked about. This is the Z790 PGITX TB4 from ASRock, which is actually the same exact motherboard that Phil is running in his small form factor build. It's been real solid for him. So that should be good. Here's the other SF750 power supply with the Micro Center label, so there's that. And then for the cooler, this is a 280 millimeter Asetek, just a standard cooler, which only needs a 4-pin PWM to run the pump, which is perfect because I'll probably put RGB fans on there, like either Be Quiet 140 millimeters or something, because I don't want to have to load 72 different types of software on this to run the RGB and stuff. So the Trident Z should run off of this motherboard for RGB, hopefully. The graphics card is fairly simple, and then any fans we plug in, I'll just use the RGB header or splitter off of the motherboard. So with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and do the basic stuff right now. We'll do this more vlog style rather than like montagey style, because I sort of want to talk to you about this as I'm building it to give you any of the nuances of this particular case. But this I don't need to talk to you guys about. I'm just gonna unbox the power or the motherboard, put the graphics, CPU, motherboard, and then brackets for the cooler will go on there. All right, so the motherboard's assembled, the CPU's in there, the standoffs and the back plate or bracket is installed for the cooler. And then my NVMe is installed right here. It's a 2 terabyte T700 from Crucial. So it's like a 12,000 megabyte per second drive. And if that weren't enough, there's still two on the back that could be installed, one here and one there. And the nice thing about this particular case is because it's so open and there's so much airflow, there's actually room to be able to install an M.2 on the back with a heatsink. Because normally in a standard case, there'd be a tray right here and all that heat would get trapped and then these would probably slow down over time. However, there is room for a heatsink on this, so that would be nice. Don't need it though, 2 terabytes plenty for this particular build. So now that that is done, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and mount it up inside of the motherboard, inside of the chassis here. And I don't remember exactly where it went. In fact, I still have to install the standoffs and stuff. And I think if I'm gonna get rid of the handles, I need to just do that now because I don't wanna have to try and deal with that later. So here we go again, after all of the effort I had to go through to get those off. So they're kind of hard to see, but I have to take these little flatheads right here off on each side, and then the handle will pop off, and then these little caps go in through the aluminum and then just thread through, and this caps the hole. It's kind of an interesting design. I think there could have been a better way to design that. They did redesign it a little bit so that it doesn't spin. The problem is the cap just wants to spin in the hole as you're trying to undo it, especially since they did put a tiny drop of Loctite on there. But now that I've already got it off once, you can see it's a lot easier now. A lot easier now, especially since the handle won't turn. Okay, so now that I've taken the handles off, you can see the plugs are just in there, right? That's what I was talking about. But this is the side right here where the fans have to go. Now, I have to consider how I want this to be. Actually, I think it'll be okay because it's so heavy. I was debating whether or not I need to flip the front switch right here. So this is the power switch right here, right? And I was debating if I needed to flip this whole piece over. It doesn't look like I can anyway, because if I don't want the fans pulling air up from the bottom if it's gonna be like super choked off. But I think with all the ventilation on this, plus once the feet are on there with the standoff, there'll be enough of a gap for air to come through. Although it is an AIO, so having the radiator on the bottom is like the worst possible solution for an AIO. So now if I were to flip this, now where it says NANOQ is upside down. So that really bothers me now. I don't know how now I want to do this. It doesn't look like I can actually flip the button over either. Okay, so I was in the middle of taking this apart to try and flip this whole base, but it just dawned on me the locking mechanism is only works with one side, with this pole right here. So that means it has to stay the way that it is. Now I can try and see if the cover can be flipped for the middle piece, but no, I don't think so. I think this is just an oversight on their part. I have to take it off and see, but I don't think that middle button can be flipped, which means I'm just gonna have to now deal with NANOQ being upside down, which is really going to be super annoying when it comes to like the OCD. See, this is why building and stuff is important, because these are things you don't catch until you go to build. It might seem like it makes sense until you go to build and then you realize these little things start to get in the way. So I put this back together. So it's dawned on me that because of the way that this is set up, I could have the AIO in here with the rad at the bottom, but I can have the tubes actually be higher than the pump itself. So all we need to do is keep air from getting to the pump. Fortunately, if I want to flip this over, it's just pop off the 4 rubber feet and flip it over. So it's not like I have to change anything, except maybe fan orientation at that point, but there we go. So that's gonna go like that. Our power supply is gonna go right there. Our RGB cable's right here out of the way. I have no idea what the efficient order of operations will be in this case, but motherboard makes a lot of sense. Graphics card being last also makes a lot of sense. It's fairly open though. It's a pretty open chassis, especially for an SFF. So I'm not too concerned about anything necessarily like being in the wrong order, stopping me from doing something in the way I need to do it. These 2 screws on the top of the motherboard are really easy to get to because it's open. These 2 line up perfectly with this rail, so getting a screwdriver in there at a straight angle so that you don't start cross-threading it into the standoff is very difficult. So all I did was take the tip out of the screwdriver bit and then just kind of go at it like this with my fingers to make it as tight as possible. And then just hope vibrations later don't somehow loosen those up, because it will, if you can't get at it at a straight angle, it's gonna cross-thread itself. So I just did it this way. It's not like this is some load-bearing part really, so it's not like I'm gonna have to worry about that coming loose. So that's in there tight now. Now we can take our reverse. This is a 180 degree, like reverse 180 riser. Jeez, that is under so much tension. Oh, that's an interesting sound. I don't know. It's kind of stuck now. I've never heard that sound before.
It's like super not in either.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Whew.
just really had to stretch it.
Whew. I never heard that snappy, cracky sound. Like I've heard the pins engage going clink, 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 not the starting to look like a computer. Starting to look like a all right, so the power supply is about to go in. It's literally gonna hang from these posts, which I have to mount to it like that. And then these get screwed into there. So it'll just be hanging like here. But I kind of want to slide it down as far as I can. Oh, that's gonna be rough though, because that plug has to go right there. Because the cooler, it just dawned on me, with this revision, has to go on the bottom. I don't have a choice. The reason for that is the way the graphics card mounts. It has to be resting in that slot because remember, it doesn't have, this is not the revised model that has the bracket that holds the top of the graphics card in. So it cannot hang. It has to be sitting this way. So looking at the cooler though, if I go in this way, I can keep the tubes higher than the pump. This is the most not ideal way to mount an AIO. You definitely would want the rad above it. However, with the tubes being above it, and technically this little like bend right here, any air could potentially collect up here. All we need is the air not to make its way to the pump. So if it were like this, that's a problem. But because we're like this, we're gonna try it and we're gonna see. Because that then makes my revision for the graphics card even more important than I realized. Because if you want to flip it so you're hanging the graphics card, you have to have that bracket mounting it down, which is now in the revised model. So the radiator has no choice but to go that way. This is now why it might have been ideal to just have left the feet on. Because then the graphics card is still mounted down well enough, and the pump would have been down here with the rad right here. So that would have been ideal, and I don't want to go through putting the handles back on, I really don't. And it was still very tippy in my opinion. So I need to mount the power supply first, that way I can then put the cooler in. So I think it needs to be power supply first, then cooler, because the cooler has to run in front of it at this point. I don't think I'm gonna be able to go on top like I was hoping by sliding it down, simply because we need room for this thing to still plug into it. It's possible, there's a lot of room here, but I'm gonna see what I can get away with. And then also too, you want the intake fan facing this way. Technically not the graphics card, although we are using a blow-through style, so the graphics card could blow air right through itself into this and out, but I really don't want to blow superheated air into this. Because it's open on this side of the chassis as well, I think there'll be enough of a gap for any of the air that's trapped right here through the blow-through for the bottom fans pushing up to kind of help it force its way out the top. So that's why I'm conflicted. Like the 4080 Super, it doesn't get that hot, it gets to like high 50s. So it might actually be okay to mount it this way. That way the air feeds right into the power supply and then forces its way out, so we have efficiency on the GPU. But this won't be hard to reach to flip in the future if I want to try that in different orientations. So now I got to mount this guy up. So this is actually very solid. And I just noticed like the power supply comes all the way to the edge, so I can't run the tubes in front. There won't be room for the thing to slide back on. All right, so the issues continue to stack up with building in this case. The cables that Joe made are too short. They're just too short. And so I wanted to have the power supply facing this way so that the air can go right into it from the graphics card and exhaust out the top. I was trying to just create as much flow as I could rather than having this, like the graphics card blowing right into the back of this power supply, which is going to be causing sound, like turbulent noises. So I don't know why they made the cables this way, but as you can see, we think they're intended for it to be flipped the other way so the fan is facing out, because I can get this 24 pin to attach, or for the 24 pin, but then this one is not long enough to reach here. So with it flipped over, those will be much closer to the board, which means I'm now shoehorned into going a certain direction with these particular cables anyway. Whereas in the manual, it shows you have orientation options. I also am not gonna be able to mount the fan to the outside like I wanted, pushing air through the rad. Now it has to go on the inside, pulling air through, because of the fact that I don't have long enough radiator screws to mount through. And in fact, they only really show supporting fans on the inside. And the problem with putting the radiator down low now is now if I do that, I don't have enough length to try and scoot the power supply back down and go on top of the power supply to leave the tubes at the highest point like I was trying. Now I've got to go under the power supply and have it come back up and hope there's enough tube on the top there, just for there to be a place for air to get captured that's not inside the pump itself. It's looking like the more and more I build in this, the more and more concessions I'm having to make, like the more compromises I have to. I just want to give you guys a little update of why it's literally been 2.5 hours since the last clip, and this is as far along as we are. We stopped to eat, but this is just, I guess I could use the cables that came with the power supply and get this all working the way I want and go digging through even more screws to maybe find radiator screws that are long enough to make it work. I think the way I want to do it is better than the way I'm being forced to do it here. So let me try the way that it's going to work currently to see if that's even worth staying that way. All right, you can see we're making progress here. So I've had to just go ahead and switch the fans to the inside, which I'm not a fan of, pun. But I went ahead and just switched this out now with the Silent Wings Pro adjustable fans on the high setting. So it's medium, high, and like ultra high. And you can see I cable managed now the 8-pin UPS is right here along the fan, so it's not interfering with the fan blades as they spin, which was a concern about the fans being right here where all the wires are, so everything's clear. They're still gonna have to go like this and route those tubes somehow in there. We'll figure it out as we go. That's the only choice I have because it will not fit up along here anymore because that 25 millimeters was the difference in length I needed to make it to be able to reach up and around the top. Also too, because I had to lift the height, because I don't have like high flow slim fans, which would have been ideal, I had to move the GPU bracket up to its highest position, which means now we might have an issue with the 4080 Super's extra height and the cable. So hopefully that will clear. I've got to plug in the pump. I've got to plug in both of the case fans, and I'm not going to do a 120 on the front. I was thinking about it just to have more cross flow, but for now, this would be easy to add later. It's all this space right here. Nothing's going to fill this in. So if I feel like I want to experiment with cooling and see if that would help, I can add that later. But for now, I think with how much airflow these 140s move, even though it's going through this AIO, I have a feeling it's just going to just blast air through here and it won't be a problem. So there's that. Oh, I scratched the rad, whatever. It'll just match. But I had to flip this around as you can see, and now as you can see the cables reach by flipping that around. I wish they were a little longer, that way I would have had the option to flip it around if I wanted. So I'm gonna continue with getting the pump mounted down. I'm gonna take off this thermal paste. I'm gonna use my KPX, which I use on all my stuff. It's gonna be superior to the pre-applied stuff from Asetek. And I'm just gonna now pray that everything's gonna fit. I have a backup plan. If my 4080 Super Founders won't fit, I'll probably just put the 4080 Pro Art in there, which is a standard normal size 2.5 slot, no extra height card, which will look really silly in this, to be honest, because it's so big. Not to mention it's also like gold and black. Please fit, because the all black cooler is gonna look so good in here. The real challenge is gonna be if these tubes are gonna be in the way of sliding the case back on it, which I kind of think in the moment they will be. All right, so that's what I came up with. It's not the prettiest thing in my opinion. And I had to make this like thing to hold it in place because obviously it just wants to pop out. So I need to do a test right now and see if this will even slide in the chassis. Nailed it. So my RAM height might be a little too high because I have to push those fittings down. It's hitting because the fittings can't go down. So I think I'm gonna have to use some super basic lower profile RAM for this.
Or spine shift it.
So there's one screw that's kind of a pain in the ass to get to when everything's put together. It's this one down in here, and that's just because the radiator gets in the way. So I just put the fitting on there and took some pliers and did it that way. Anyway, now that everything's unconnected or unscrewed, I wanna show you how we can just slide the spine over to give ourselves more space. Now we can't go that far because it won't clear the graphics card at that point, but I can go to right there. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a couple screws in, just not all of them, to see if the graphics card will still clear. If it will, then I think we'll be okay at this point. It's more stable like that because it just leans against the case now.
Oh yeah.
Dude, it's so dense. Oh, it's touching the GPU. I'm worried that as it goes down, it's gonna slide and scratch the GPU. Oh, what's it hitting?
Oh, it was the whatever that is, the riser cable?
Oh my gosh, it did. It just shaved the riser cable. Well, that's a problem. So things are getting interesting now because I now have a bunch of screws I can't put back in because they didn't oblong the holes. And you saw the shavings that were in there. That's actually from right here, the leading edge of our riser cable. Now what we were talking about is whether or not we should have routed it under this pipe and then make the bend. The problem is that would be such a sharp bend, it would still stick out because where it's being pushed out is actually the edge of the motherboard, not the edge of the pipe or the pole. So if you see from that angle, it sticks out beyond the rail. So that's what's making it push out into the edge of the case. I think we could still use this little shaving right here on the leading edge. That's just a RF shaving or RF shielding that's on there. I could put some tape on it, like some gaff tape, electrical tape, and then probably build up a little bit of a protection there. Fortunately, it did not scratch our card, so everything I just went through did protect our card, but that's bad. So I don't think it shaved all the way through into the wiring. Yeah, so you can see right there, that's the shielding that's built into each wire to protect it from RF interference, obviously from all the other electrical stuff in here. I also have to reroute this cable anyway because it's hitting the fan on the back. So it's hitting the back fan, which there is like such a small gap right there. That's gonna be a loud fan. Like that fan having to pull air through because I couldn't turn the power supply the way I wanted. That's gonna be all kinds of turbulent noise. So I guess we'll just have to see. But for now, I've gotta take the graphics card out. I have to reroute the 24 pin or the 12 pin to be more in the middle of the card where it's not interfering with the fan. See if I can't reinforce this in some way and get it to be a little bit more flat. And then let's see if I can actually get the cover on at some point. Anyway, we did look in the manual though to see if it talks about how to route this. There's zero mention of how to route it. So this motherboard obviously is hanging down a little bit below the rail. I think every single ITX board would do that because of the way that the holes are standardized, so they're all gonna hang out past that. So this is something that might end up becoming a widespread problem for them, and I hope they see this prior to the full mass production. All right, so rerouting this cable. There. That now got me the space I needed. So instead of going behind the power supply as I was initially doing, it's now going along top of the 24 pin. Fortunately, I have nothing to plug in there except the front power button eventually. So that's there. So here's the reinforcement I tried to make for the riser. It's just, there's 2 strips of electrical tape right across where it rubs, plus gaff tape right over it to try and hold it down as tight as possible on the rail. Let's see if that helped in any way whatsoever.
Oh my God, it fits.
Oh my God, it's heavy. Where's that industrial scale, Nick, the big one? All right, we'll start with grams, since that's what most people watching probably, actually no, most of my viewers are American, but anyway. 10 kilograms.
Yeah, 10 kilograms. Yeah, 10 on the dot. That is.
In pounds, that's 22 pounds for this tiny little case. 22 pounds and a half ounce.
That's half a weightlifting bar.
All right, here we go. Let's see what we got. Hey, the RGB works. Dang, it actually creates a decent amount of light in there. Only on the top though. Lame, it needs light on the bottom too. It is cool looking though.
Let me see the front.
It's just a hole.
Oh yeah.
That's why having an RGB fan there would be nice. Yay, it works. And you know what? I can hear a little bit of bubbling in the pump. Sometimes it takes a minute for AIOs to get it all out. Let's just go into the BIOS and see. Let's see what the current temperature is on 27C, 26.5. This thing's actually super quiet. What happens if I go into the fan setting and just set the fan to like its fastest setting? It's fantastic tuning. All fans, full speed. Oh yeah, the pump's like whack. You can hear it now. I don't like the pump at 100%.
Oh no, that's the VRM fan.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Dude, the actual like tone of these fans in there is not bad. Okay, this is a pretty like beefy ITX build, a 14700K with a 4080 Super. I'm glad it works. I'm glad I didn't ruin that riser cable. What am I gonna do with it now? I don't know, because technically I'm gonna do this all over again when they send me the revised build, which might need a little more revision, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, You can see, the nice thing is with the power supply facing the way it is, you can see the power supply switch through the hole. So if you were to like somehow forgot to flip that on, you could take like a pencil or something and stick it in there and turn it on if you forgot. But there's actually a fair amount of air coming out the sides right here. So not all of it is making its way through the top like I would hope. I could feel air, I could feel heat coming out the top, so that's a good sign. By heat, I mean warmth. But a lot of that air is hitting the resistance. Path of least resistance, you got all these openings right here, so a lot of that air is splashing right out and not making its way through. So I feel like a fun test to test the configurations of this case would be to like tape off all these side openings, force the air up through and see what would happen. I think a lot would come out right here too. I still think I want to do a front 120 fan on this at some point because honestly, it's just with no grill or anything right there, it's kind of open and industrially looking. Like I feel like we need something there to light it up or whatever. But you can even feel the air coming out the front right here. Like, not all the air is making it to the top like I would have hoped, but I think it's gonna do just fine. Anyway, speaking of doing just fine, I think that's gonna do it for this video. I would love to turn it on right now and get the OS installed and get some temperature tests and stuff, but we're out of time for the day because this took a lot longer than expected. One other thing I wanna point out too is you can see, the RGB RAM and stuff through there. I feel like if you were to really load this up with RGB, it would look really neat. And then set it to whatever color you want. Obviously right now it's just RGB puking. It does need a radiator on the top instead of the bottom. But I think once it's sitting stationary and it finally allows that air to reach the very top of the tube and kind of make that gap, it's fine, because look, it's already getting quieter. But as soon as you move it, if there's any splashing, you hear that? Yeah, so it's fine as long as you're not moving it around a lot, which means it wouldn't be necessarily the greatest travel case, but it certainly looks good sitting on the desk right here. That's pretty sick looking, actually. All right, well, that's where we're gonna get out of here. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm glad I did the build in this because it gave me some more insight onto maybe an email I need to write to them, giving them some ideas on like the biggest one is for that shifting spine, that we need to be able to have all those holes elongated and be a slide, not where one is a lockdown position. Because as you saw, if I had left it where it wanted to be, it would have shaved the front of my card. So keep that in mind if you're gonna build in this, that if you're using an FE or anything wide like that, especially the metal on metal, if it's shifted all the way to one side, as you bring the case cover back down on it, it's just gonna swing. And I would have been very upset if this beautiful black anodized card suddenly had silver bit showing because it shaved it. So I had to kind of leave some screws out and customize where it landed just so that it would fit. All right, guys, thanks for watching. As always, we'll see you in the next one.